portion of the news brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
Nearly a year after Bahamians took to the polls and voted against the regularization of gaming and web shops for Bahamians, those enterprises remain up and running.
And as Janaea Noel Ferguson tells us tonight, that those who promoted the Vote No campaign say the government must step in and fulfill the will of the Bahamian people.
We said, do not put this on the backs of the Bahamian people. If it fails, you take responsibility for it. If it messed up the country, you take responsibility for it.
That's the advice that President of the Bahamas Christian Council, Reverend Ranford Patterson, said his members gave the nation's leader before last year's gaming referendum. The clergyman said church leaders met with the Prime Minister recently, and he never thought that what was revealed would be made public.
The Prime Minister did mention that he regretted coming to the public in our meeting. And that's fine. I think he did say that.
The Prime Minister made that position known. Then we recognized that it was not a personal struggle, but that was actually a political agenda, a political statement that he was making.
And although web shops remain open and some other entities have even expanded, supporters of the no vote believe that their efforts were not in vain. They noted that this could also have an adverse effect on future referenda.
Why would I go to the polls to vote again? If what I'm going to, when I get to the poll and my decision at that time, how do I know if my decision is going to be
valid?
You see?
You think that may happen with the constitutional referendum?
Trust me, it will.
But many residents say the church should step away from the issue.
Everybody being to the poll, they're supposed to educate the Bahamian people as to what was going on. They didn't educate nobody. So come on. The Christian Council is only set for making a bunch of noise, but what have they done for us lately? They don't give us no money. The web shop does.
The church should do God's work and leave the government work to the government. What we need to do is keep the shop open. Let us live, man, and ask the church people to be humble with us so that we can survive.
Now a call for action is being planned for next week Tuesday in Rawson Square. It's there that members of the Bahamas Christian Council say they plan to host a prayer of thanksgiving and urge the government to shut the web shops down now. Janaea Noel Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
The Inter-American Development Bank, at the request of the government, approved a $450,000 technical cooperation initiative today called Strengthening the Capacity of the Office of the Prime Minister. The objective is to develop an economic planning mechanism for the overall management of the Bahamian economy. The government plans to establish an economic planning unit within the Office of the Prime Minister. During a press conference this morning at the Prime Minister's office, State Minister for Investments, Kalis Roll, maintained that this grant will make it easier for investments to thrive here.
As you look at some of the requirements to execute these projects, capital, having qualified individuals, we're still not where we should be. We still find ourselves importing labor, which is a major issue in this country. And a part of the development process of this plan is to identify individuals and skill set that may be needed to accommodate these projects, to execute them in a, the term I would use, in a professional and profitable manner.
Now, the government also intends to create a national development plan which will provide a comprehensive overview of the economy, set policy direction for economic growth, and identify strategies, programs, and projects to improve the overall health and sustainability of the economy. IDB Representative Astrid Winters hopes that the funding will give the government the tools it needs to steadily improve the economic status of the country.
The development of the plan is a consultative process that will incorporate existing plans and strategies that have been already developed in various sectors, and also consult with people on the broadest level possible so that there's real consensus in a national plan to guide development over the medium term.
Financial Services Minister Ryan Pinder says the Bahamas is well advanced in finalizing its compliance arrangements with the United States Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA. In providing an update on the country's progress to becoming FATCA compliant, Minister Pinder says they're looking to take an umbrella approach to the legislation, which covers everything to do with FATCA.
and other countries are looking at passing multiple amendments to their different acts to allow it. We think that's a much more complicated way to go about it, especially in a financial center like the Bahamas that has a number of pieces of legislation that deal with a number of different types of institutions, right? So, we are really looking at the umbrella approach. We think it's probably the best way to address industry in the most comprehensive fashion and the clearest way. And we've been working already with the Office of the Attorney General for the last few months in putting together draft legislation.
Pinder is urging all financial institutions to carefully review and become familiar with all the requirements of FATCA. In the meantime, the ministry will continue its outreach and consultation with the industry on FATCA that's expected to impact between 600 to 2,000 businesses here in the Bahamas. Additionally, Minister Pinder says his ministry will take all necessary measures to ensure that Bahamian entities are permitted to conduct business without impediments in global markets.
So you have to have that legislation passed, and that's what we anticipate having done by June. Both the agreement and the legislation and guidelines from the regulators that are necessary. Then the institutions start to prepare. They have to register. They should be now just looking at their clients, figuring out who they're going to have to report for and who they're not. That's an institution issue that they have to do. And then by the end of this year, they'll have to register with the IRS and then start reporting next year.
In news from the courts, accused murderer Kendrick Sands walked a free man today after a judge ordered jurors to acquit him due to a lack of evidence. That's because the prosecution's key witness apparently had a change of heart on the witness stand. During today's proceedings, he denied, among other things, that he knew the accused, telling jurors that the first time he saw Sands was when he arrived at court yesterday. Now, the witness, who is in prison on another matter, also claimed that prosecutors were mistaken as to his identity. He then denied that he identified Sands in an identification parade as the man who shot Giftino Davis back in June of 2010. As a result, the Crown offered no further evidence in the case, and Justice Bernard Turner instructed jurors to acquit Sands. However, Turner recommended that an investigation takes place in order to determine whether there was any witness tampering. Convicted murderer Ginaldo Farrington will have to wait a bit longer to find out what his fate will be after his sentencing hearing was postponed. Farrington was convicted last October of the murder and armed robbery of 47-year-old banker Stephen Sherman. Jurors also found the 22-year-old guilty of the armed robbery of Sherman's niece. You may recall that Sherman's wife, Renee, walked free after a judge ordered jurors to acquit her due to legal reasons of conspiring to kill her husband. Her co-accused Cordero Bethel was also cleared of murder, armed robbery, and conspiracy to commit murder charges. Meantime, Farrington returns to court February 19th for sentencing. And a judge has sentenced 36-year-old Ashwell Bain and 34-year-old Trevor Bolag to 10 years each in prison for robbing Liam Wong food store back in March of 2011. However, the judge deducted the 2 years and 10 months Bain has already spent in prison, while Bolag will only spend 9 years in prison because he's been on remand for a year. The duo was facing a maximum sentence of life in prison. Their armed robbery trial opened January 15th. However, after jurors heard evidence from 3 prosecution witnesses, they both decided to plead guilty.
Teachers are being encouraged to take part in an initial public offering of shares by the Bahamas Union of Teachers to start construction on its new hall. The perspective for the offering was shared earlier this week with a group of educators during a meeting at Workers' House. Jimenita Swain was there and fills us in on how teachers will benefit from taking part.
President of the Bahamas Union of Teachers, Belinda Wilson, said one of the priorities for this administration was to build a new hall for the union. She said the new design now provides for an 18,000 square foot facility, but how will the union raise the millions of dollars needed to facilitate construction?
Instead of us going to a commercial bank, what I would have come up with, and the executives would have agreed, and it was also approved at our annual general meeting, is that we would offer shares to our membership. So we propose to raise $6 million. So throughout the Bahamas, we'll be doing meetings like this for our members.
Wilson says shares are being sold to BUT members only, although other private investors are being sought. The share offering closes March 31st. Commonwealth Bank is making loans available to teachers who qualify for share purchases.
But we need the funds, and we thought that it would be good because it's an opportunity for investment actually for our members, whether they want it to be short, medium, or long term. So we're giving our members first preference, and the shares will be sold at $1 per share.
The new hall will not leave its current location, and all plans have been approved.
To have a conference room, and we would have a hall similar to this one that we're in now, because when our hall was built in 1971, the Bahamas Union of Teachers only had 300 members, and so today we boast of about 4,000 members.
Ms. Wilson said construction is expected to begin in June for a new hall. Jimenita Swain, ZNS Network News.
Coming up later in sports, basketball players remember one of their fallen heroes, point guard Audrey Martin. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news was brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.